TV. In the book, the woman is vile, so much so that she even asks a young girl to slit the throat of her new husband. So it's no surprise that Dowager Queen Alicent Hightower suffers one of the worst and saddest deaths in the Fire and Blood novel. She's one of the few surviving members of the Targaryen house on Team Green, and with Alicent's death, the Green cause ceases to exist once and for all. And in this video, that's exactly what I'm going to be discussing: the final days and death of Alicent Hightower. So without further ado, let's begin. Alicent Hightower's tumultuous life before her death in Fire and Blood explained. So the one thing that we absolutely need to remember is that House of the Dragon has greatly altered the personalities and roles of several of the characters when compared to George R.R. Martin's Fire part. And in the book, Alicent Hightower is an absolute piece of shit. One who was so vile that she asked a child to slit the throat of another, but more on that later. Now, I hope you've put your spoiler hats on, because there's going to be a lot of that. So I'll try not to spoil much from the events that are going to take place in the currently ongoing Season 3 of the show, but what happens in the book is that Rhaenyra eventually gets to sit on the Iron Throne. But her reign as Queen Rhaenyra, the first of her name, Queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, does not last for long. And she's forced to flee from King's Landing after that unfortunate event that's called the Storming of the Dragon Pit. King's Landing is basically left in a state of loot and riot, and if Rhaenyra wanted to live, she had to leave, and go back to Dragonstone. After this, Sir Perkin the Flea, a hedge knight, had managed to place his squire on the Iron Throne. This young man named himself King Trystane Truefire, but was ousted and put in a dungeon when Lord Boros Baratheon and his army arrived at King's Landing. And Queen Alicent witnessed all these shenanigans unfold, but kept her calm because she somehow knew that none of this would last. And now that Rhaenyra was gone, the Greens would once again take control of King's Landing and the Red Keep. And moreover, King Aegon II was about to make his return to the Iron Throne. You see, by the time Rhaenyra returned to Dragonstone, King Aegon II had already captured it, and he had been there the whole time after his escape from the Red Keep. And he fed his half-sister to his dragon Sunfire as soon as she entered the castle of Dragonstone, with her son Aegon III, or Aegon the Younger, watching the entire horrific episode. Aegon II eventually returned to King's Landing, and Alicent negotiated with Lord Boros the wedding between the king and Boros' daughter Cassandra. But that's not the only wedding she consented to. Alicent, albeit reluctantly, agreed to marry her daughter Jaehaera to Rhaenyra's last surviving son in Westeros, Prince Aegon the Younger. She did that on Lord Corlys Valerion's request, and that despite the fact that she didn't trust him much. But King Aegon's reign was also going to be super short-lived, as Lord Stark and his army of the lads was approaching King's Landing. In addition to this, Princess Rhaena had hatched a dragon egg, and out came the beautiful pink dragon Morning. These two things were signs that the Blacks were ultimately going to prevail in King's Landing, after all the infighting and bloodshed and burning of homes, markets, people, and cities. As unfortunate as it may be, the king was found poisoned. But when Lord Stark arrived, he was shocked to learn that Alicent had been imprisoned in the dungeons by the Valerion men. She may be who she was, and she may have no honor left in her, but she was still a queen and a mother who had just lost her son. So Lord Stark, who had become hand to King Aegon III, ordered the execution of all men who had a role to play in the capture of Alicent. Now this was very interesting, because it must have left Alicent biting her teeth. You see, Alicent was a religious woman, and would have killed people for much less than what had been done to her. And yet Lord Stark, or the Blacks, showed her compassion. Compassion that she herself may never have shown to her enemies. And this treatment must certainly have hurt her somewhere. But nothing would have hurt her more than losing King Aegon II, her last surviving son and child. Even Queen Helena had thrown herself from the window to her death, and losing Aegon was one of the final blows to Alicent and her psyche. Alicent Hightower's death in Fire and Blood. Anyway, so Aegon III was now king and was supposed to marry Princess Jaehaera. But despite her previous consent, Alicent had changed her mind and was opposed to the marriage because she knew that Jaehaera was the last surviving Green member, and her marriage to the new young king would effectively end the Green cause. But it's not like anyone cared about what she wanted, and Aegon went ahead and wedded Jaehaera, although he never got to bed her. Oh yeah, she was very young. But the thing is, Alicent's presence itself in the court had become a bone of contention for everyone. The simple reason was that she was a total bitch in the books, but neither could she be executed for her million crimes, and more, some were still sympathetic towards her given that she had been queen, and some were afraid that her execution would reignite the recently doused flames of war. So what do you do with her? And yeah, you couldn't even keep her free at the court because of fear that she would either hurl all kinds of curses on King Aegon III, or she'd just grab the dagger of some unattentive soldier at court and strike the king. And no, this was no exaggeration, like she could actually go to such an extent. As precedent, we can take a look at what she told her granddaughter, Queen Jaehaera. So the grandmother and granddaughter were once allowed to share a meal together, and the older queen used the opportunity to ask the younger one to slit her new husband's throat while he slept. Jaehaera had seen enough deaths and throat slittings in her recent past, and the trauma of hearing about such a thing sent the child screaming. It was then decided that Alicent must be kept away from the royal couple. Amidst all this, the solution to the Alicent problem came from Lord Tywin Lannister, who suggested that they send her into a gentle imprisonment. That is, by confining her within her own quarters in Maegor's Holdfast. And so it was decided that Alicent would be kept as a prisoner in her own room. After this, she remained in her chambers for the entire final year of her life. And as company, she was only allowed her personal guards, her serving girls, and a septa. Apart from these women, she never met anyone, and neither was she allowed to meet anyone, least of all her granddaughter or the king. Keeping her interest and stature in mind, she was given thread to sew and books to read. But the woman took little to no interest in any of those. She had lost all her interest in all worldly things, and had begun to lose her mind. So much so that she once tore all her clothes. And from that moment onward, Alicent's situation kept on exacerbating. She would often speak to herself, and came to simply hate the color green, the color of her own house, the color that she once wore with pride. The year came of 133 AC, and all of King's Landing became engulfed in a disease called the winter fever, in which one often lost their minds. Alicent was one of those early ones to be diagnosed with the disease, despite her minimal contact with the outside world. But unlike many others who became most delirious, Alicent maintained a semblance of her sanity, in that she would confess her sins and tell all about it to her septa. She would even tell her septa how she wished to see her children just one more time. And in her final hours, the once powerful Queen Alicent had become but a fraction of what she used to be. In those final hours, she spoke of hoping to see King Jaehaerys, to whom she used to read and who praised her often. But curiously enough, she never mentioned her own lord husband, the king, Viserys Targaryen. Perhaps all those stories about Alicent and King Jaehaerys were in fact true. Perhaps as a young and comely girl, she did in fact give her flower to the old King Jaehaerys, and hence remembered him in her final moments. Whatever be the case, the Dowager Queen Alicent Hightower died of winter fever at the hour of the wolf on a rainy night, and the realm considered her death a mercy. How will House of the Dragon treat Alicent's death? So would House of the Dragon punish Alicent like Fire and Blood did, where she was left alone with her grief, her guilt, and the ghost of every evil and foul choice that she made that had pushed the realm into war? Or would the show try to give her a softer end, maybe one where she saw herself as the girl she used to be before duty, marriage, politics, and Otto Hightower turned her life into one long royal prison? See, that was the tricky thing with Alicent. She was not innocent, not by a long shot. But she was also not a traditional monster. She was a mother who tried to protect her children, failed horribly, and then had to live long enough to understand what that failure cost everyone. And I really don't think it would be fair to say that any mother deserves to watch her children die as some form of justice. I mean, take Cersei Lannister for instance. Joffrey was wicked, spoiled, cruel, and yes, the guy had the moral compass of a rotten lemon. But Cersei's reaction to his death was still heartbreaking, because in that moment, she wasn't the queen who wanted power. She was a mother who had lost her child. Alicent had that same tragic core. In her final moments, when she spoke about her children, that was the part of her that came through most. Not the political player, not the queen mother, not the woman who helped light the fuse of the dance, but the mother who wanted her children back. Having said that, there was a strange elegance in how Alicent's punishment worked in Fire and Blood. If someone had supported the Blacks, she would have had them executed without losing sleep over it. But when her enemies had power over her, they spared her. That was the part that must have hurt her the most. Because, see, the Blacks didn't merely defeat her through strength. They also shoved their restraint in her face. They could have treated her with the same cruelty she would have used against them, but they didn't. They proved they had more poise than she had allowed herself to have. Unbearable. She could pray, she could grieve, she could blame the realm if she wanted, but deep down, she could not escape the truth. She had helped push the kingdom into war, and the war had taken almost everything from her. Now, Fire and Blood had Alicent die in her chambers during the winter fever, and her last words expressed her desire to see her sons, Helaena and King Jaehaerys again. But House of the Dragon had a different problem, because the show hadn't really built Alicent's childhood bond with King Jaehaerys in a way that would make that final wish land with the same force. So the show could change the emotional focus. Instead of Jaehaerys' mind to the girl she had been before her father pushed her toward Viserys, before marriage broke her bond with her best friend, before every choice became tied to fear, duty, and royal survival. And yes, that would be tragic, because the woman who helped cause so much pain may end with a memory of the only life where she had not yet become part of the machine. After the Season 2 finale, a compassionate version of Alicent's death would make sense, but only if the show earned it. Alicent had already started to reckon with the cost of her actions. She had accepted that she was partly responsible for Rhaenyra's losses, and her main wish had become freedom from duty, a chance to make things right for Rhaenyra, and a way to break the same cycle of emotional captivity for her daughter. That was a good start, but please note, it was only a start. She could not simply walk away from a war she had helped cause, then expect peace to pat her on the head like nothing had happened. So if House of the Dragon wanted Alicent's end to carry real emotional weight, they would have to make an active effort to repair what she had broken. Regret alone would not be enough, tears would not be enough, a sad face in a candlelit room would not be enough either. She would need to act, because only then would her death feel like the end of a tragic arc, rather than an easy attempt to soften a character who had already done too much damage. Since Alicent was one of the few survivors of the war, her death would likely become one of the final deaths of House of the Dragon. And as far as endings go, that could work. Her last days could be a mirror of the whole story, where legacy, power, fear, and ambition had eaten an entire family from the inside. Game of Thrones had also ended with the death of a queen corrupted by power, and House of the Dragon may head toward a similar note, although this time the infamous shadow of that ending would hang over it. So yeah, the show would have to be careful, because one wrong step and people would smell forced tragedy from a mile away. At this stage, it would have been hard to feel too much sympathy for the Fire and Blood version of Alicent, because that version had often felt colder and more severe. But House of the Dragon Season 1 had shown us the younger Alicent, the girl whose innocence was damaged by Otto and Viserys before she fully understood the world she had been pushed into, and this context changed everything. It didn't erase her mistakes, but it made her fall sadder. So maybe in those final moments, Alicent could find one last glimpse of happiness as she waited for the people she loved most in a life that had gone terribly wrong. And honestly, that may be the most painful ending for her, because after all that power, all that duty, and all that blood, the only thing she wanted was the family she could never save. So yeah, that was all in this one, folks. If you liked the video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these awesome videos. Stay safe and have a good one.